Most important position in college football and the most important position in football is quarterback, and everybody knows it. And yet, there are still programs that get it wrong. And I don't understand how that happens. If you really pay all that much attention, when's the last time somebody really, really struggled because almost in spite of having a good quarterback? It very rarely happens. However, there are programs that are lifted and elevated by good quarterback play. And I don't know how you get that wrong. In the late 2000s, Urban Meyer somewhat revolutionized college football with the idea of like, hey, I'm going to get as many pass rushers as I can get. I'm going to get as many offensive linemen as I can get. And if I do those things, we're going to be pretty good. And I'm probably going to attract a pretty good quarterback too. And that worked. He won 3 national championships, one with a third string quarterback. But when you look at the history of at least in the college football playoff era, who are the programs that have won national championships with bad quarterback play? They don't really exist, right? Like it's not really, it hasn't happened. Even going back to the BCS, when you look at the national champion, they had a pretty good, if not great, slash elite quarterback. Very rarely was it like, wow, they won in spite of that guy. I think there's a reason for that. And yet, college coaches continue to screw this up. If you are a first year head coach, I don't think there is a more, after you hire your staff, I don't know that there's a whole lot more important things you can do than either hit the transfer portal to find the best quarterback you can get or put in all of your eggs in one recruiting basket to get recruit the best quarterback that you can get that's going to have to play for you pretty quick because coaches now don't get 4 or 5 years to instill their program and recruit their own player. You get 3 years to succeed, and if you don't, sorry, out the door. We're going to be on to the next guy. Whether that's fair or not is a topic for a different discussion and a different day. But the reality is, you get 3 years, and it might not be fun or fair to the quarterbacks that you already have in your room, but I think Notre Dame is really propped up at some aspects this year because of Sam Hartman. Now, the Irish thought that they were a quarterback away from being a national title contender. That's obviously not going to happen this year. We've already got 2 losses, so that's out of the cards for them. But what are they without Sam Hartman is the different question, because they're really good at running back and pretty good at offensive line and not not good even at other spots. But because you had a really experienced, a pretty good college quarterback to elevate you higher than you think you need to be, or I guess better than playing above your level, that works and it matters. On the flip side, Alabama doesn't have a quarterback and it shows. Now they're good enough at others to be elite and national championship caliber, but their quarterback play is really bad, and they obviously don't have an answer to rectify it. I mentioned this on an episode earlier this season after the loss to Texas. If they had an answer, Jalen Milroe wouldn't still be the guy. And I don't. Jalen Milroe might get there eventually. It's just there are some places you don't get on the job training, and quarterback at Alabama is one of them. They're just that standard has to be hit and has to be met. And sorry, buddy, because there are flashes when you watch Jalen Milroe at times. It's like, wow, I can't believe that throw was that bad. How did you throw the football that poorly? Are you sure you're right-handed? And then the very next play, it'll be a like, wow, that was a dot. That was an NFL throw. So there are flashes there. It's just inconsistency, and I don't know if that gets better with age or not. But Alabama is being held back by their quarterback play because they're an elite team if their quarterback play was even good. Instead, in the loss to Texas, they just had to settle for Jalen Milroe to throw the football as far as he could. Hope it doesn't get intercepted. Hope your guy catches it or gets a pass interference call. And then we're going to run the ball out of the shotgun. That was the offense. You can't compete with elite teams in the country playing that style of football just because your quarterback is that bad. And yet, Alabama came into the season thinking like, okay, yeah, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And I don't know if that's arrogance. I don't know what the reality of that decision is, but it ain't great. And they're now at this point in the season on October 11th wondering like where are we going? What are we doing? How do we fix it? And I don't know that there's a great answer for it. There are just some positions that you can't be held back by, and quarterback is one of them. So if you are a coach and you get 3 years to turn this thing around, one, you probably don't already have a quarterback because generally, if you got a quarterback, your coach probably ain't getting fired. So you either got to go find one or get one to come to you and say, "Hey, we're gonna." If Dylan Gabriel wasn't at Oklahoma, yikes! If Michael Penix Jr. wasn't at Washington, now that's not to say that they don't have really good players around Michael Penix Jr., but he's shown to be the type of player to elevate programs. What has Indiana done since he left? Faltered greatly. When Michael Penix Jr. was there, they rightfully should have been playing for the Big Ten championship. He leaves and they can't get out of their own way. There is not another position in the sport or really in sports that can elevate an entire team quite like elite quarterback play. And yet there are so many programs that don't get it right. And I think that's the one of the questions that ends up like, how did you? I can look past some other stuff, but at Florida, after the body of work that Graham Mertz had put together, how do you view that as like this guy is absolutely slam dunk 100% our guy, and he's going to lead us to where we want to go? You can't talk yourself into that, but that's where they sit. That's what their thought process was like we are going to get to where we want to go with this 500 quarterback who like kind of teeter totters on just barely more touchdowns than interceptions. What? What are you talking about? What are you doing? That's the outside. That's the biggest question you have to answer. If you don't like somebody's time management or a fourth down call or anything or something like that, understandable. We can discuss that. But I need somebody to take me into the mind of you thought that Graham Mertz was going to be your savior. You thought Graham Mertz was going to be the player that led you to an SEC East division title. Just it doesn't compute to me how you can, and maybe it's just lack of options. If Sam Hartman went to Florida, things are much different for Notre Dame and for Florida. If Sam Hartman went to Alabama, things are much different for Notre Dame and for Alabama. Luckily for Marcus Freeman, Sam Hartman chose Notre Dame because what does it look like for the Irish if he's not there? Luckily for Washington, and this worked out for Kalen DeBoer at Washington. He picked up a really good transfer quarterback that cemented that we are moving in the right direction immediately under his regime. And that goes a really long way in helping you either get a contract extension or another high profile job on the back of, and that's not Kalen DeBoer is an offensive genius, but on the back of solidifying the most important position. You did it. Washington and these Washington made it known we are in the market for a transfer quarterback when Kalen DeBoer got that job. He almost brought Jake Haener with him from Fresno State. This idea that the transfer portal is some like leper colony where nobody wants anybody from there. And if you are trying to use it to improve your program, if Deion Sanders doesn't have Shador Sanders, what does Colorado look like? Hint, it's not good. It's not great. It's not pretty. And they're not on national TV 3 weeks in a row to start the season. And they're not being talked about the way they are. But because they went through the process of it's really important to be good at quarterback from the start. There's no way to overstate that. If Shador Sanders doesn't go to Colorado, are they 1-4 right now? Probably. Maybe 0-5. And yet some coaches just don't either they don't get it or they don't put the emphasis that they should. And that's the like malpractice that you have to wonder. Anytime nobody should start questioning coaches immediately, especially before a first game or anything like that. But if you want to look in the crystal ball of what your team's future looks like, look at the quarterback position. If you're really good there, you're going to be really good. There are very few programs where the quarterback is really good and the team stinks. It just doesn't really happen because there are tractors and there are trailers. There are semis and there are trailers. You are either putting the team on your back and pulling them with you, or you're along for the ride. And the team is so good around you that you are the trailer. But there are tractors, there are semis that are pulling that thing along. And I think Michael Penix Jr. is one of them. Sam Hartman is one of them. Shador Sanders is one of them. There are teams right now that are being elevated by their quarterback play. You could argue Spencer Rattler at South Carolina fits in that group, where the Gamecocks are elevated because of his play. And then if you look through the top 25 and go, I don't know, LSU is being elevated by their quarterback play a little bit. Their defense is dreadful. I think Jaden Daniels deserves to win the Heisman Trophy for what he's done so far, but because they're not going to be in a college football playoff and they're not going to be in that conversation unless they unless he has a really big game against Alabama, he's not going to get the credit he deserves. But he is elevating his team around him. Like Miami is probably being held back a little bit by Tyler Van Dyke. Is Louisville being held back a little bit by Jack Plummer? Maybe a little. But if you're going to come into a new situation, by God, you better have a really good quarterback. Otherwise, the questions start immediately. Fair or unfair, they start immediately after the first game because every football fan now can at least, there's not a lot of there are discussions maybe of who's good and who's bad. There's not really discussions of who is elite and who's not. Those questions get answered really, really quickly. And if you can answer that question really, really quickly, you're in a whole different ball game than fighting for your life in the transfer portal, looking for some guy that you hope and pray is going to be your guy. That'll do it for today's edition of the Daily Huddle. Thanks for making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. We certainly appreciate it. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you're listening on a podcast, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel and getting in front of more college football fans, and that's always a great thing. Back at it tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle on Saturday.